tonight I've got a message, and I've called it the never-ending word, commitment. And the big C word, I call it, commitment. And it's a scary word to a lot of people, you know. Some people are really scared by the word commitment. And because as soon as you say commitment, it goes, well, what about me? What about my life? What about my fun? What about my freedom? What about my rights? And it's a scary thing. Men especially have to deal with commitment, that thing of locking in and saying, I'm in for the long haul. You know, when I got married way back in the early 80s, I wasn't a Christian, didn't have any church friends, and the only marriage counseling I got about getting married was this: you'll be sorry. Or the other one was, it's a life sentence, murderers get out before you do. I mean, there was no sense of the benefit of commitment, it was just the fear. Most people, all they see when they hear the word commitment is not the benefit, but the cost. They view commitment, the word commitment, through cost rather than benefits. And the truth is, the benefits of commitment always outweigh the cost of commitment. The benefits that come with commitment always outweigh. The only real thing that suffers with commitment is self and selfishness. That's the thing that suffers. As soon as the word commitment is thrown at somebody, the thing that's going to hurt the most is their self or their... And at the end of the day, that's not a bad thing. Because when you start to deal with selfishness or self, you're in a much better place anyway. And I found that the truth is, with commitment, the very opposite of what we thought was going to happen takes place. We thought we were going to lose our rights, we're going to lose our fun, we're going to lose our life, we're going to lose all these things. But I found the truth is, man, when you commit to a person, whether it's in marriage or to a family that you're a part of, or to a life group that you're going to the church that you're a part of, and to God, it doesn't come with bad things, but great benefits occur. And it's a scary thing, though, with commitment. It's a scary thing when you decide to lock in. It's going to cost you something. You know, when I did get married, Lee and I just became Christians just after we got married. And I grew up my whole life, and I love surfing. I mean, I still love surfing. All my pictures or whatever in my camera, in my phone or whatever, there's lots of surfing photos. And I've surfed in Hawaii, and I surfed in Indonesia, and I surfed all around Australia. And I loved it. I was passionate. And then I got married. And she was not so passionate about surfing. As a matter of fact, not that she did not like it, but it got to the point where she hated it because it seemed that I was more in love with surfing than I was with her, which is not totally true. Which is not totally true. But I did love my surfing. And I love to have my space. And what does God give you? A space invader. And so she wanted to be with me more and all the time, and surfing was my space, and she was my space invader. So there's this huge tension, and it was like, you know, at the end of the day, it's either the surfboard or the girl. And I thought, no, and I just got saved, and I went to God and said, God, what should I do? Stupid place to go, stupid question to ask God, because it's not what I wanted to hear. And he said, Mark, just let it go. Oh, no, I don't want to let it go. I love my board. I don't want to let it go. And so I said, you know what? All right then, let's go. So I sold it. I sold the surfboard. I didn't make a big deal of it. Didn't go and tell her, well, I sold the surfboard. I didn't go that. I just sold it quietly and didn't go surfing for a while. And after about a year, it took her a year to realize that I'd sold the surfboard. A year to realize. She said, hon, I haven't seen you going surfing for a long time. I said, no, I sold my board. And really, you did that? Yeah. For you, for me? Yeah, for you. I did that. And she said, that's awesome. You're so beautiful. Why don't you go and get a brand new one? I love it when you surf. What? A year? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I ended up getting the surfboard and the girl, all right? So it wasn't either or now, it was both. And the whole point of commitment, sometimes we think we're going to miss out. The truth is, I found you don't miss out, you get more than you expected. Commitment has great benefits, and the reason we don't go there is because people tend to view it through the cost. Commitment has two major parts to it I'm going to discuss tonight. First is the chained to bit, the yoked to, the connected to part. And then there's the abiding in principle that whatever you're connected to, there's a transference that takes place. Whatever you connect to, things move in and out of that thing. It's a situation where you draw from. And it's two major parts to commitment, and the two parts are being yoked, chained, connected to, in commitment to, the whole thing there, and then what happens in that thing. And the commitment part's like, when you've seen movies when they have the oxes and they're doing the fields and they got the big yokes over them, and there's a yoke over the oxen's head, and there's a yoke over the other oxen head, and it keeps them going the same direction. Well, commitment's sort of like that. It's like wearing a yoke. It's like wearing something that connects you. It's like being handcuffed or chained to somebody. It's that very inseparable look. That's what commitment means. I mean, I was in San Fran a couple of years back, and I saw this couple coming towards me, and is Gothic still a word? Do people know what that means when I say that, George? Gothics? I mean, this guy and this girl were dressed in black. They were dressed all black. And they had their faces sort of puffy white, like powder or something. And his hair was like this. It must take hours, or they use ice cream. I don't know what they do, but it's a look. And he had a leather jacket on, and he's walking down. She had a leather jacket on with the white face and the black everything. And I noticed as I got closer, they had a lot of metal. There was bits of metal hanging out their ears and through their eyebrows. And I did notice that both of them had nose rings. And I thought, well, yeah, so no big deal. So I'm just walking, and they're coming closer. But what I noticed when they got really close was not only both did they have nose rings, but they had a chain going from his nose ring to her nose ring. That's commitment. That is commitment. Wherever he goes, she goes too. Wherever she goes, he goes. And everything within me wanted to go, hey, look! But I'm a pastor, and I can't do that sort of thing anymore. And it would have been fun. No, it wouldn't have been. That could have been a nasty act. So anyway, commitment. It's that being connected to. Back in the early 1500s in Scotland, if you murdered somebody, they used to chain the dead person's body to you. So you would drag that thing around for the rest of your days. And who knows, when you start dragging a dead body around, not many people want to be your friends. And not many people want to feed you. And you imagine that body starting to decay and smell and stink. The whole thing, man, you were connected to that dead body. It would start up being connected here, but it'd just start to fall apart. And then it'd be just lying. And eventually you ended up being like the dead body. Why? Because no one would feed you. You had no food. You were connected to that thing. And eventually you became just like them. Because whatever you connect to, yoke to, or chain to, you become like. Whatever it is that you connect, whatever thing you chain yourself to, whatever thing you commit yourself to, you start to become. There's a transference effect. So firstly, you need to look at what you connect to and who you commit to. You want to make sure you're connecting and committing to the right things. And unfortunately, many people outside of this building are connecting and committing to the wrong things. And the bad news is they end up in a worse situation than they thought they were going to be. But if you commit and connect to the right things, it has great benefits. It doesn't have major costs. It has great benefits. I remember when the Bible, when Jesus teaches this tough message, and I can imagine he preaches this message about his body and his blood, and the whole thing we did tonight, and we got to eat of it and drink of it, and the crowd got, oh, it's a bit awesome, and they just left. And then the disciples were left at the front, and he turned to them and said, "You going to go as well?" And Peter responds, he says this, he said, "Where else can I go? Who else has the answers that contain to life and eternity?" There was a commitment or a connection beyond the good times or the bad times. They were locked into this Jesus. They were locked into this thing. They were in commitment, in covenant with Him. They weren't going anywhere. And I believe that if you're going to see the great benefits that God has for your life and what He wants to do in us, what He wants to do through us, will depend on how much we're prepared to commit ourselves to His ways. The sense of commitment, understanding to commit to His ways, His church, the people of God. And the second part of commitment is the transference principle. The Bible talks about trees and plants, and they're connected to the root system and the vine there. And because they're connected, they draw source and energy from that thing. There is a transference of energy that happens. Whatever you're abiding in, whatever you commit to, whatever you connect to, you draw from. Either good or bad. You can't help it. That's why it's so important that we look at who we're connecting with. That's why it's so important we make sure who we're giving ourselves to. We make sure those things, because there is a transference effect that takes place. That's why sex without marriage, before marriage or outside of marriage, doesn't work that well. Because when you get that close, what happens? There is a transference effect. You're not just having a physical thing with a person. Now you've connected spiritually and socially, and you've got to untie that thing eventually. It's a big deal to what you abide in, who you commit to, who you connect with. And if you don't understand it, the reason is there's a transference effect and you can't stop it. But if you do it in the right way and you commit to the right things and you see that the house of God is a place to commit to and connect with, if you start to be committed to Jesus, then it all starts to be incredibly powerful. Jesus Himself says, "Take my yoke upon you, for it's easy and light." Paul talks about being chained to Jesus as like it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. It was the best thing, not the worst. Tonight, to yoke or not to yoke, that is the question. Truth will be, you will commit to something even if it's just yourself. You will commit to somebody, some way, some principle, some philosophy, same thought idea, even if it's as low as just to myself. We can't help but commit to something, one way or another. So tonight, I want to look at the three great benefits of connecting to the purposes of God and the house of God. I've been saved a long time now. Again, I never grew up in church life, and when I found Jesus, it changed everything about what I saw about life, and to this day, it's still the best decision I have ever made. There is no doubt about it. Man, when I found Christ, I never backslid, I never looked away from Him. He changed my perspective on life. I've always seen the commitment to Christ as having the best benefit. Who was that person? I don't know. The best benefit of any commitment I've ever made. And the first thing about your commitment to Christ and His purposes, number one, it produces faith, hope, and strength. Don't look at the cost, look at the benefit of commitment to Christ, His church. It produces faith, hope, and strength. Let's look at Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 14. This is Paul. He's in jail, where he spent most of his time. But I want you to know, brethren, that the things that have happened to me, listen, and he's been through some stuff. Have you read about Paul? I mean, if he had an excuse to leave the church, he was the man. I mean, he had every reason. Every time he walked into a new city, there's a big banner that said, "Welcome to our jail." I mean, he was hated by so many people. You think he's famous. He's only famous now. You only get famous after you die. You realize that? At the time, he wasn't liked at all. Even church people were a bit uppity about him. But right now, he's in jail again, and he starts to be in a place. I want you to see this, but he says, "I want you to know, brethren, that the things that have happened to me actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel. So that it became evident to the whole palace guard and to the rest that my chains are in Christ." I want you to hear that my chains. What does it mean when you're chained? You're not leaving. You're not going anywhere. When you're committed to Christ, it's like wearing that chain. It's like the chain between the two nose rings. You're not going anywhere. Wherever He goes, you go. Whether it's good, whether it's tough, whether it's easy, whether it's hard, it doesn't matter. Where He goes, you go. And this is Paul. He's saying, man, my chains are in Christ. And if it means going to jail every now and then, if it's stripes on my back, if it's going hungry, it doesn't matter. I can live in the palaces of kings, but what it takes, it doesn't matter. We're together in this. And those chains are so powerful that it produces faith, hope, and strength. It became evident to the whole palace guard and to the rest that my chains are in Christ. And most of the brethren in the Lord, having now become confident, listen, the rest of the brothers in the Lord are now becoming confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Why? Because commitment produces faith, hope, and strength. And it doesn't just produce it in yourself, it produces in people around you. Nothing inspires people more than somebody that's committed to the cause. That doesn't bow down, doesn't give up, doesn't lie down, doesn't shut up. They're stuck on this. This is it, who I am. They can go away. I'm not going anywhere. No turning back. I am with Jesus. That inspires people. Faith, love, and hope are the great benefits of commitment, just not in your own soul, but in the souls of those around you. Sometimes in life there are tough times, challenges. And it doesn't go the way we think. We understand that. Mine was last year, my year from hell. I mean, it doesn't go the way you think. It doesn't turn out like the plan. It doesn't go, oh, blessing, 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 blessing. Mwah. Stuff goes wrong. You go through trials and tribulations. It could be your year from hell today. Right now, you could be going the worst year of your life. But the benefit of commitment will far outweigh the cost of the commitment that you're in with Christ. Paul could have given up, but he didn't. He said, you know what? I'm in this for the good, the long haul. I'm committed to the things of God. Paul's in jail. There's also a bunch of other Christians in jail. It was a pretty good place to meet other Christians back then. In jail. They were not, it's not like today. Back then, you say, I'm going to live for Jesus. Put him in jail. Oh, thank you. I'm going to live for Jesus. Put him in jail. I think he meant put him in jail. Oh, no, put him in jail. I mean, it was a tough time back then for the believers, and they were all in jail there, and man, they were all scared, and they weren't sure they were going to ever get out. Things were going to be made right. They were fearful. They had no hope. They lost it. But then Paul says, he says, because I was in there with them, and they saw my chains. He says, because they say my commitment, because they saw what I believed, it says they started to get confident and started to speak the word without fear. In other words, the people around them started to rise up with boldness at others. Even that it was evident to the whole palace guard. You got to understand this was a Roman jail, and the move of God that Paul presented to the world was from Rome, and it all happened out of a jail cell. Paul's commitment to the cause that gave him strength and faith to overcome his challenges and his toughest times. Then his life becomes an example to those around you. I want to tell you tonight, if you want to inspire a generation to live for Jesus, be committed to his cause. Block in, we're in, we're done. Dusted, signed, sealed, blood, whatever you want to do, spit, I don't care. Cross finger, it doesn't matter, just whatever it is, lock in and say, this is it. Then your life becomes an example to the others. Every great movie has a commitment theme in it. It's whether it's the hobbits versus the orcs in Mount Doom. Bilbo, man, committed to that journey. Just wouldn't give up. Go home, little hobbit. No, I'm going to Mount Doom. Every great movie, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's aliens versus humans, whether it's somebody, it doesn't matter whether it's a Fantastic Four, it doesn't matter. It's all about somebody that won't give up. It's always somebody that says, you know what, I'm staying here, bring it on. Commitment is the great sense of strength, faith, love that gets people excited. Committed people inspire us, I can. Committed people challenge us, I will. They can even offend us. Man, I don't know, committed people can offend us. Oh, they make me sick, the big suck-ups. Always trying to help the boss, always being around the pastor. You know why it offends us? Because we know that's the right place to be. That's why we know we're meant to be. That's where we're meant to be, is in that place of encouraging and lifting people and going up. You see, people that are committed to the cause don't worry about what other people think. They're in, they're locked in. So it even can offend us. But committed people, man, they inspire us and they challenge us. When you're planted, when you're committed, it becomes evident. You know, when I First got saved, I was in a big company and I was a manager that did really well. As what we put our hands to, we always did well, we were significant. And at the beginning, all my friends who were they were all heathens back then, and then I was one of them, so I was not having a go at them. And then I got saved, and all of a sudden, I'm telling them about Jesus, and they're expecting all my business sales to go worse, but it gets better. And that really upsets them. Man, he's doing better. And I'm telling them, so at the end of the day, after about a year, they kept saying, oh, don't worry, Mark, it's just a phase, you'll come through it. It's just a phase, you'll get, that's all right. But after a year or so, that's the preacher man. That was my nickname in the company, preacher man. And it used to rub them the wrong way because we were always the best. We always did the best. And what happened at the end of it, they were, oh, preacher man, that's preacher man. But every time they got drunk and they had a problem, they'd come and talk to him. Because commitment inspires people. Commitment says something that nothing else can say. So at the end of the day, when they had an issue, it wasn't somebody else over there with the big mouth who could laugh the loudest. It was, let's go and talk to the preacher man. He seems to be committed to what he believes in. That changes everything. And we came to the top part of our company, and here I was brand saved, never spoken in my life hardly, and the big 100-year celebration was a year, 100 years the company's been going, and the top branches, preacher boys. And I have to speak at this big conference. I've never spoken much at all, hardly ever. I hated it, my story, I hated it, and here I am, and I started to share a bit, and I said, you know what the heck? I'm just going to tell them a little about Jesus. My platform, I'm their best, they're not getting rid of me. I'm just going to take it out here a little bit. I stepped out a little bit and said, you know what? 2 years ago, I gave my life to Jesus. It was the greatest decision I ever made. And I said my thing. I didn't think it was that cool, that good. I'm much better at doing it now. And anyway, as I get to the end of it, I just want to thank you. Everybody in the room stands up and gives me a standing ovation. Can I tell you, committed people inspire people. It doesn't matter what they believe in. Commitment brings faith, it gives strength, it gives hope to people around you. So the second part of commitment, or the second thing that produces from commitment, is it improves desired outcomes. It improves desired outcomes. So when you commit, you get a better result. You just get a better result. It improves. John 15 verse 4 says this. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. And if you commit and abide in the vine, he says you will produce fruit. In other words, if you're committed, connected, and planted, abiding in the vine, you will see bigger and better results. The transference principle of abiding in heaven, now heaven starts to abide in you, takes place, and then with God, all things are possible. So by being committed, you don't have less outcomes, you have better outcomes. When you're committed, connected to his house, you get better outcomes because there's other people around you. I've never found, again, last year as I went through that time of cancer, I want to tell you that in that time, I've never felt the wonder of being connected to a church like I did last year. It wasn't me by myself. It was a whole group of people saying, you know what? He can do this. God can come through on this. I'm with him. I'm going to believe with him. I want to tell you, being connected, being committed improves desired outcomes. Now you've got God on your side, you've got other people on your side, and in there, we see the cost of commitment. Oh, man, to be a Christian, to be a serious one, to go to church that much, but the cost is nothing compared to the benefit. The book of Ecclesiastes says this, chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. It says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Others, God, and yourself is a threefold cord. God, yourself, and others, and these ones cannot be quickly broken. It's a synergistic affair. A horse is a big animal. It can pull a lot of stuff behind a horse. You put two horses together, it doesn't pull twice as much, it pulls 10 times as much. It just doesn't double. The Bible says one puts 1,000 to flight, but two, 10,000 to flight. See, commitment increases the desired outcomes. It's important that we understand that in our commitment, the cost, though it's going to cost us something, the benefit is far greater because we see the victory of God around our lives at a greater level. And the third, is this helping anybody tonight? The third reason why commitment's powerful is this: it brings rest to your soul. Matthew 11, verse 28 through 30. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That's what he said. "Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, but you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now understand, the word yoke here means teaching. The philosophy of Jesus was this: if my teaching will produce rest and peace, not rest and pest. No, it produces peace and rest in your soul. He says, my life, my yoke, my teaching, my philosophy, my way. But even bigger than that, I just love the picture of the yoke. You know, that thing when we went back with the oxen, and even though it's a teaching and it means teaching, I can still see this yoke, and he's saying, you know what, put your yoke around me. So you remember the oxen? He's got one part of the yoke on Jesus, and then the other part of the yoke is on you. Now you're yoked to Jesus, you're connected, and you're going to stand together, and as you stand up, you think, well, what's going to happen? But Jesus is about 1.5 inches taller than you. And when you stand up, all the weight slips over to his side. So his yoke is easy. It just sits on your shoulders. It's light. It brings rest and peace for your souls. It's not a strain. It's not an effort. It's not a stress. It's not something you have to carry, this yoke of Jesus. He's just that little bit taller than you, and he carries all that weight. I want to tell you, in Jesus, through the darkest of days, it is without a doubt the thing that brings peace and rest to your souls. You're not just alone. You feel like, man, I'm not in this by myself. I'm yoked to Christ. I'm connected to his house. Everybody feels better when they're not alone. Everybody feels better. You know, when kids, they slip into mum and dad's bed, and you wake up and there's kids lying all over you. And you try and kick them out and they crawl back in. Why? Because they just feel safer when they're not alone. Who knows when you're in a house alone, you hear every noise. What was that? I'm sure I closed that. What was that? Sure. Oh, what's that? Yeah. Oh, that's better. Oh, what was that? Oh. Man, when you're alone. But you know what? When you got other people there, you don't hear any strange noises. There's rest. There's peace in your soul. That's the value of commitment and being connected, is that, man, it's the whole concept of gang mentality is. The whole point of a gang is you're not alone. We're going to beat you up. No, you're not. It's all about gang. It's all about not being alone. So much tougher when we're in this together and we're connected to one another. Being yoked, connected, committed brings rest in a stressful world, brings peace in an uncertain generation. And remember this, peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the presence of God. It's not the absence of problems. Peace is the presence of God around your soul. So why do people shy away from commitment? They just don't see the benefit. They just see the cost. Don't look at commitment from afar. Walk towards it, and blessing will follow you all of the way. You will wear a yoke. His name is Jesus. But you're going to wear a yoke anyway. You're going to yoke yourself to somebody, something. You'll connect to something. Why not the easy, light, rest, powerful yoke of the Savior of the world? If we're going to see our generation reach for Jesus, we're going to see this building filled. I can't wait till we come here a Sunday night and we have to pull down all these screens because there's so many people just flooding in the doors. it will be because of the never-ending word, commitment. That's what it'll be. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes tonight?